G'day, H. Mahar here. You've been ghosted by somebody with borderline personality? Is that how the relationship breakup happened? How are you doing with surviving that relationship breakup, being ghosted by a person with borderline personality? I have an interesting comment that I'm going to respond to on the channel. So the comment comes from someone who was ghosted by a quiet borderline. And the commenter says, along with enjoying my videos, thank you for that, is it appropriate to expose these deceivers and people with BPD on social media? My quiet borderline sucked me in for the past year. Idealization. We made plans for the future. She never devalued me. She just totally vanished the past 40 days. No response to my text, voicemail, etc. We had no issues. Very loving, amazing connection. Then without a word, she just ghosted me and disappeared 2 weeks before my travel plans to meet her for the first time. She was very excited about the commenter coming out to New York for her birthday. Her discarding and disposing me like common trash has totally crushed my heart and soul. I feel these heartless borderlines, though they did suffer from severe childhood adverse experience, that wasn't their fault, but they need to be held accountable as adults for their cruel, hurtful, heartless actions. It's just been devastating. The commenter continues, my former girlfriend was the sweetest, kindest, caring, compassionate, empathic, and loving woman I've ever known and have had for a partner. Perhaps she never, capital letters, had nor possessed those attributes or qualities, but just mirrored those qualities that were mine. What are your thoughts on exposing these deceptive borderlines to the general public to save others from being pulled in, or as some people might say, seduced, only to be dumped within a few months without any rational, logical excuses? Before I answer the larger question, let's look at a couple of aspects of this. But they knew each other in a long distance relationship, it seems. If you are knowing somebody and meeting somebody and falling with somebody online, and of course you can Zoom and Skype and all that stuff, but you don't really know them if you haven't even met them and you've never spent time around them. So think about that. The comment doesn't really indicate if they even ever met before. So you see how there's a lack of boundaries there that are important for people with codependency to think about. In the idealization, they made plans for the future. And the commenter said she never devalued me. Well, I think when somebody ghosts you, it's pretty much devaluation. Whether they've said or done anything else before that, the act of ghosting is a devaluing act. And so she just totally vanished the past 40 days with no response. Here's the thing, the commenter says we had no issues, and then very loving, amazing connection. Then without a word, she ghosted me and disappeared. It was idealization, first of all. Doesn't excuse the person ghosting or not saying anything, just disappearing. How could somebody think or believe that they had an amazing, loving connection when A, they hadn't met the person, in person, and B, it had only been a few months? This is what people with codependency need to become more aware of, because this is your responsibility. People with BPD move quickly, but people with codependency don't slow anything down either. It falls under codependent delusion with poor boundaries. I understand the person's feelings. I bet a lot of people could relate to this, whether it's in the past or you're not sure, but you might be going through this right now, or whatever the circumstance of long distance or not long distance. To say it was an amazing, loving connection, and you don't know how long it had been going on, right? But a loving, amazing connection, and then this person is now experiencing that their heart has been crushed and their soul has been crushed. It's very, very painful. But the thing is, this is what happens in codependency when people don't have boundaries, and when people are in if not an over-giving place, but an over-trusting place, one could say, but it's hard to discern that in the beginning. Something that I don't want to leave out here. What is the motivation for the commenter's question? Description of her being, it being a loving, amazing connection, now heart and soul crushed. What's behind that, really? Because for people with codependency, this is part of the issue. And you can't know what the person, if they have BPD or not necessarily, but it's a lot on a person's part to extend that kind of, I think it's an overextension of trust, especially if they didn't meet, but even if it was an in-person kind of relationship to begin with. So what's underneath this question? What's the motivation for it? What causes the question is really not only how much pain the commenter's in, but there's anger in there, it sounds like. I don't know how the commenter is feeling, but it is extreme codependency that causes the question. And I guess the person is still really focused on the discarding quiet borderline X and not thinking about himself other than that he's aware of a lot of pain and heartache. To say that one is drawn in, seduced in, whatever it feels like, that's also an issue because that's where people with codependency maybe can't make a different choice, but a healthier person would. And again, it's that idealization becomes everything that a person with codependency to varying degrees really needs. And a healthy person doesn't need. They're not that thirsty. They're not that hungry. They don't need that much validation. I'm talking about in terms of emotional boundaries. And codependency means that people are lacking in some emotional health and maturity. Often, not for all people with codependency, they don't have secure attachment in childhood either. There's abandonment wounds and shame wounds. And it seems like definitely the commenter is devastated, without a doubt. Anybody would be. But also angry enough to be asking the other question, which I'll get to. The cause or the reason or the motivation for the question, I think on one hand, if the person hasn't done anything yet and they really will value my opinion, think about it at least. I'm not here to tell people what to do or not to do, then that's a positive sign that while they're feeling very strongly and in a lot of pain, maybe the reason for the question is because they just want someone else's, in this case, my opinion about is it appropriate to sort of out them on social media, etc. And is that appropriate is that designed to get them back? Or is that, as the commenter did say, to warn others? Because you can warn others all day long. And just think about it. When you were in the idealization phase with a person with BPD, if you're not in one right now, and it's past tense for you, that part. If somebody had come along, or you might have had friends or family members, as I've had many clients say, come along and say, there's something off with this person. I've noticed this, and the other thing. Would you listen anyway, right? Because falling in love means that boundaries are going down in the first place. And if you have codependency, especially in the more severe category of codependency, then the boundaries that are going down, you might not have many boundaries that can go down. As people with healthier boundaries, the boundaries relax as they're falling in love, but not usually in the idealization phase with somebody with BPD. And I'm not saying people can know that ahead of time, but healthier people would recognize that and their boundaries would stay higher. The reason and motivation for the question is important too, because it has a lot to do with the commenter's confusion, extreme pain, and also anger, and maybe wanting to, and not really yet, and it's understandable. But a lot of people with codependency, when this happens to you, of course it's devastating. Of course, maybe you never heard of BPD before, etc. And you want them to be responsible and you want them to be accountable. What the cause and the reason, and therefore the motivation for this commenter's question is of how codependent the commenter is, and how little the commenter, by the nature of the comment in the question, is focused at all on that or on himself. So that's the thing that people with codependency really have to look at. You made choices, albeit you didn't have all the information, but you couldn't have known that then. But you made choices. So people with BPD don't seduce, they don't induce you, they don't infect you, they don't make you do anything. Because if they could make you do something, then how come codependence, overgiving, overcaring, how come you can't make the person with BPD do anything? Can't make them go to therapy, can't make them answer your calls, can't stop them from ghosting you. So thing is, people with codependency really need to think about this, and I don't mean this with any blame or anything like that, but there is responsibility. When people with codependency can't possibly know what they're about to get into, in all fairness, there's still a responsibility for the choices that you made. And this can be, when this can be accepted along with the pain and the agony that you're in, as mindfulness radical acceptance practice, as a beginning to moving through healing and recovery and forward. And then what's really important about that is it takes away, maybe just a little bit in the beginning, but it takes away that sting of feeling like it's all the other person's fault. It's all the person with BPD's fault, because it isn't all the person with BPD's fault. The person with BPD has all the responsibility for the ghosting, but they couldn't make this commenter or any of you fall in love with them. They can't make you do anything. So if you think they made you do it, or they infected you, or they seduced you, then it's another symptom of codependency. It's another sign, because you need to take your responsibility. And I'm not saying this commenter should just, if this just happened, get there now. But it's like, that's what will help people from ground zero of the agony, the heartbreak, and the soul crushing, and the pain, and the shock, just to start to get back on your feet, just ever so slightly, maybe a few minutes at a time, is a radical acceptance of it all. But the realization in time, but the realization that you did make a choice, that they couldn't make you love them, they couldn't make you want to be with them, and that wasn't what they were doing, because they don't have that kind of control. So I think sometimes people with codependency will externalize out their control needs, especially after being ghosted, which is quite understandable, and then, be blaming the person with BPD. Well, they're responsible for the ghosting. They're responsible in that way for breaking your heart and really, really hurting you in a horrific way. But they're not responsible for why you chose to get into a relationship with them and you didn't know what was coming. So the motivation for the question is important to examine here too, and the comment, because it really shows the person's codependency along with their pain and heartache, and hey, my compassion goes out to you. So this is not about judging at all. Asking the question so far posed and describing it the way that the commenter describes it, the way lots of clients describe it to me, the way that a lot of people with codependency, most if not all, feel after they've been ghosted, is that you were tricked. You were seduced into it. You're now infected by that person with BP, etc. None of that's true, though. You have responsibility for that part, and you're gonna, and the best way to look at this is to take that responsibility. And yeah, they're responsible for ghosting you. They're responsible for the no closure, because this person's obviously hurting over that as well and feeling just dumped like garbage, when it's important to realize that it's people with BPD that feel less than and that can attach more. So people with codependency can have those issues as well. So it's really important to look at the motivation and the cause for the question, which really does highlight for the commenter, which I hope it will help the commenter, but for anyone else, also I hope it will help you, again, to focus on yourself and your codependency. Even in those unforgiving minutes to hours to days to weeks to months to maybe longer, where people are in this agony and maybe still invested in, will they hoover, or can you get an answer in the reverse hoovering? Because people often aren't done right here where this commenter is right now with what happened. And should the person with BP, after they slam that door in your face with the ghosting, should they open it again So many people go back around again. And what is that? Well, again, it's codependency. It's lack of self esteem, lack of self worth, lack of self respect. It's needing what you need from other. And that's not a whole lot different than people with BPD. So the need levels are, and what's needed is a bit different. People with borderline personality need people with codependency or need people to get identity through them. People with codependency might not be aware at all consciously what you need, but you need something from your childhood too. So this idea that they infect you, they seduce you, no. People with codependency need to take responsibility for the choices that you made. And like I said, the ghosting borderline is 100% responsible for that. And they're also responsible for the no closure. And people with codependency in a lot of pain gonna have an even stronger need for control because people with codependency don't know how to deal with self. A dysfunctional relationship to and with self. So you're gonna be looking at other and trying to figure out, can you do something about it? What can you do? Blame them. And in this case, the commenter, this is the first time I've ever been asked this question in 30 years of doing this, working with clients, 30 plus years now. And I've been online since 1995. You can do the math. April of 1995. I don't know how long that is. I'm not good with math. So this is the first time I've ever been asked this question. So now I'm going to go to the heart of the question. Now that I've addressed the motivation, the cause, and what the question reveals, not only is a commenter in horrific pain, this is just unspeakable when it happens. People with BPD might not be being intentionally cruel, but yes, it's I don't even know how to describe it. But if you've been through it, you know how painful it is. And I just want to add in here, by the way, and I'll do another video on this coming soon. But when I was with the borderline narcissist alcoholic, 2004 to 2006, I got ghosted 4 times. So that's another thing that I actually just hadn't been thinking about because I don't think about that person at all unless I'm thinking about doing videos here. So now I'm going to go to the ultimate question that the commenter asked. So the commenter, who I hope they will understand that everything I say I mean very respectfully and to help, but the commenter's meat of the question after we look at the cause and the motivation and the pain behind it and everything that, of course, I can understand and feel for the commenter about, and I'm sure many of you out there, unfortunately, may well relate to. So this commenter asks, by the way, this comment was posted on my video, borderline deception in social media. Is it appropriate to expose these borderline deceivers on social media? I think that people need to make their own choices, so I can't tell anybody what to do. But what I would say about that is, how can we ever say that treating somebody in disrespectful and then more ways, even though they've disrespected and hurt you so badly, how is trying to respond in some way, quote, in kind, going to help a person to feel better? Because it's not, number one. And number two, it's not going to help somebody feel better about themselves down the road. It might feel immediately gratifying, but it sounds like from this commenter, it's a strong impulse. And so I think that the commenter and anyone who might resonate with this or feel like the commenter, it's really important to not follow through on that impulse that comes from your anger and your pain, as huge and as hard to deal with it as it is. So I don't think it's appropriate to expose them online for the reason it's either about revenge, and people have to really think about that, because there can be consequences to that. And it's about self-respect, self-dignity, taking care of oneself. And then, of course, as the commenter stated, that he was wondering if it would be appropriate to do this, to share who this person really is in the public online, to save others from going through what this person went through. And is it appropriate to out a deceptive, ghosting borderline, especially when the relationship seems to have taken place online? But even so, aside from that, Is it appropriate to out them? As revenge, I would say no. It's you punching down to their level. It would be a very reactive, impulsive choice to make that you probably won't feel very good about down the road. So again, it's about thinking about yourself a little bit as well, and your respect for yourself. And sometimes people with codependency don't have a lot of self-respect, but that's something that people are going to want to work on in these healing and recovery journeys. So the other reason I don't think it's appropriate is because it's very codependent. If you're going to expose someone because they ghosted you and they really, really hurt you with BPD online to warn other people, then you're going to look like the one doing the quote smear campaign, unquote. Nobody can really be effectively warned if they're falling in love with someone in a long distance relationship, if they haven't met, if it's been like the commenter's case, I think it was a few months. My understanding here is that they were only in communication, fell in love. The whole relationship was an amazing, loving connection, and they hadn't met. So all of this has to do not only with people with BPD's patterns in idealization and quick coming together, and especially from a distance, but it has all to do with people's codependency and what's really going on and what you need to know more about and what you need to get in a healing recovery journey to understand about what happened to you in your family of origin, where's your woundedness that is the reason that you made the choices you made and you couldn't have known any better at the time. So I think that outing a person who turned out to be very deceptive because they ghosted, and this commenter thought it was a very loving connection with an amazing woman. Obviously, the woman wasn't so amazing to ghost somebody like that. So to expose them is to bring yourself, if I may put it this way, as a codependent, to bring yourself down to the level of the person with borderline personality, untreated, who ghosts and takes no responsibility and is at such a base level, like a child like base level. So I just think it wouldn't be appropriate, but that's how I think and what I feel, and not just personally, but I work with people, and so in that light, in my role as a counselor and a coach to people, I would say no, it's not an appropriate thing to do. But the biggest reason is because you can't warn others, number one, and if it's about you have to be careful. It's not about revenge. Don't want to do it impulsively. It's not going to help your pain, and the best revenge is always successful living. So in this case, healing and then moving forward and really learning some hard lessons and doing some healing recovery work and moving forward. Success is the best revenge. And on the other side of it, if it's really about warning other people or that too, other people won't heed the warning, because if somebody else falls for the person, and people with BP just go from person to person, idealizing the next one, idealizing the next one. And I have so many clients that have told me that when they were in that phase, even in the beginning, everything was wonderful in the honeymoon phase, they had friends or a sibling or parents and friends and a sibling or more than one sibling say, you know, we don't think this is a good idea. Hey, wait a minute. We're noticing this, that, and the other thing. People don't listen when they're falling in love with someone. And you can't know when you're with someone with BPD or someone untreated or even undiagnosed that might be diagnosable with BPD. You can't know what's going to happen next. And it's a real shock. And it is not something that should ever happen to someone. I hope that answers the commenter's question, and I hope maybe somebody found that helpful or useful for themselves too, because it's really important to realize that this getting back at someone or wanting to warn other people or whatever the true motivation would be in there speaks to not only someone's pain, which is, I really feel for the commenter, feel for anybody in this situation who's been so hurt, devastated, shocked, betrayed. But it not only speaks to that pain, it speaks to the level of codependency. And it speaks to the need for the commenter to really start to just deal with their feelings, not only about having been ghosted by the person with BPD, but to deal with all those feelings that people with codependency have to deal with and heal, have to sometimes, get into therapy to figure out what that is, and then be able to heal it. So it's such a painful betrayal, without a doubt. But to expose them, whether the motivation is the duality of revenge and warning other people, or just kind of the very codependent idea that I'll save everybody else and I'll warn everybody else, whoever everybody else is, it's codependency talking there, and pain. And so I don't think it's appropriate. I think that people need to realize that lots of people with codependency are so reactive to people with BPD in these relationships, right? I'm not saying they're not doing their part, people with BPD, and especially after they ghost you, which is, there's no excuse for that. But the thing is, people with codependency have to start to think a little bit more about, how are you going to deal with your pain? You need help. You need to reach out to someone to work with them, and you need to take care of yourself. So the focus for even the commenter needs to be not on, is it appropriate to out this person with BPD and their deception and everything online, because whether it's wanting to warn others or revenge, like I said, what about what it means to this commenter? What about what it means to you? What about what it means to you if you can resonate with this, or you might have, and you might have wanted to do something like this, or maybe some people have. But the thing is, it's never going to help. It's just not going to help people with codependency in this kind of agony after a relationship is ruptured, and the relationship breakup came about by ghosting, by the person with BPD doing that, betraying, ghosting. Putting things all over social media is not appropriate for you. It's highly reactive. It comes out of not only the pain and the anger, but the codependency, and the need for people with codependency to take the responsibility that you didn't know what you were getting into, but you made a choice. And that's really hard. But that can be the beginning of taking the focus off. I mean, still going to be some focus naturally, but taking most of the focus off the person with BPD that just ghosted you, or ghosted you maybe a little bit ago, and putting it on yourself. So this is codependent pain, agony, and anger, and also the betrayal of it all, and the impulse and reactivity to want to perhaps seek revenge, but to also want to warn others, which that in itself is just a codependent motivation on its own, on the face of it. Well, I'm going to warn other people so they don't have to go through what I went through. Nobody listens to warnings like that when they're meeting somebody and they're being idealized. And if you're codependent, then you don't have healthier boundaries, and you are that emotionally hungry and thirsty from your childhood, then nobody's going to heed the warning anyway. So it's important to know that you have to kind of hang on at the edge there in your pain. Hang on. Don't do that reactive thing, and don't do that. So don't seek revenge. And the other thing is, don't do, if it's in the other vein of, I want to warn other people, well, that's just another act of codependent rescuing. How's that going to help you? It's not going to help you. And remember, people with codependency in these situations, even in the utter agony of it all, what about you? What about your values? What about where's the limit and line for how you will behave and how you won't behave, even under the extreme? Maybe people don't know all the time. But it's really important for people to think of themselves first in terms of, why do you want to? Because really, to out a person with BPD that ghosted you online, or hurt you in any other way, betrayed you in any other way, if it's not just utter revenge and reactivity, then to try to warn other people, it's just still the height of codependency. In the wanting to warn others, because you can't save them either. And now it's time you need to save yourself, from the pain, the agony, and heal and grow. But people with codependency just want to keep avoiding the self, the dysfunctional, painful relationship to and with self, that for this commenter and so many of you out there has now been made exponentially horrible by the betrayal and being ghosted by somebody who this commenter thought was it was a wonderful, loving connection, an amazing woman, and all within a few months. This is the heart of codependency, and this is what happens when you get involved with a cluster B. And I'm not saying that that's that person's fault because they couldn't know. Many people don't know. Some people go on and they do know, and that's different. But the responsibility for the choices you made, no matter how much pain you're in right now, no matter how much what they did is a betrayal and is beyond cool, you made a choice and you have to take responsibility for that choice right now, not for what they've done to you. So anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I hope that maybe the commenter will, triple think this, because you don't want to lower yourself to their level. That's where, for some people, just beginning to find self-respect can come from that alone. So take care.